think Molly might be having some tech problems there.
She's frozen.
Oops, I'll be back now in a sec. There you go.
There we go, sorry. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our Women in Technology speaker series. Today we are delighted to be interviewing Tracy Keogh, the West Region Innovation Community Manager at Bank of Ireland, as well as co-founder and interim CEO of GrowRemote. This highly relevant organisation bridges the disconnect between remote work and local impact in rural areas. A significant female leader working in tech, and I'm sure Tracy has lots to share with us. So yeah, we really look forward to hearing more. Tracy, firstly, do you want to just introduce yourself and maybe give a bit of a background overview to our listeners?
Sure. My name is Tracy. I'm currently co-founder of an organisation called GrowRemote. We are a non-profit that makes remote work local. So we are on a mission to enable us to work, live and participate locally. And we do that by making remote work both visible and accessible. Before that, I spent my life in startups and startup companies, most recently setting up the technology incubator for Bank of Ireland in their co-working spaces. And so GrowRemote is very much at the intersection between community development, startups and kind of remote companies and those things, and coming together. That's how we created GrowRemote. That's me.
Cool. Okay. So I know from your LinkedIn anyway that you studied business in university and then kind of started off definitely specializing more on the business, finance, even economic side of things. At what point did you decide to that you wanted to go into a more tech related role, or what was the driving force maybe behind that decision?
I don't think I did. Oh, that's cool. Sam, that's really cool between the intro and this. Sorry, I don't think I did make that decision. So I kind of just slowly crept in. I know I always wanted to build my own thing, and I got speaking to a guy who told me that my idea was crap, but he'd hire me in his startup. So that's what I did, to go and get like a feel for what it's like. I think that's the most valuable thing that I did in my career. So not only because GrowRemote is hiring, but am I saying this, but also because it was my path. Working in a small company and getting a really close insight into what it's like as a founder is an invaluable experience if you want to do it yourself, because there's just some things you couldn't articulate. You'll never learn from attending a talk. You'll never learn from reading a book. You just need to experience it firsthand alongside somebody to know. But I know as you ask me that question, I just think of a lady, Andrea Wade. And Andrea and I had set up a thing called Startup Hiking in Dublin, which is where we bring investors and founders up mountains, because everybody's equal when you're like out of breath halfway up a mountain, you know. Yeah, still going actually. But I remember they were running a hardware hackathon in Ireland, and I was like, oh, I don't really know what hardware hacking is. Like, I have no idea. It was the first one. And Andrea was like, Tracy, it's just like, don't even worry about it. Just go and then you'll figure it out. So I went and we ended up winning. And I remember getting $3,000 in cash from me and Casey. And I was so broke that time that I couldn't even afford the bus up to, I think it was DCU actually, to attend the hackathon. And then I left with $3,000 in cash. And actually that night we dropped to $3,000 in cash on the way home. And then we found it and we spent it in the pub. But the point being that I think having exposure to people in the startup community helped kind of demystify it for me. And then I was able to kind of go, and without thinking that I had to know everything before I went. And then I just got kind of the rhythm of it, and I quite enjoyed it. That was it, really, I think. Is my connection slow?
Sorry.
No, I think that's okay. Do you want to take the next question?
Yeah, okay. Just on that kind of going into your tech-related role, would you have any advice for students who might currently be facing the decision of what career path to follow? Coming out of, obviously, a lot of our listeners would be students who are going to graduate soon and probably facing that decision.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of, I think when I was looking at my career, the thing that I like about technology, I guess, is that it can enable you to do lots and lots of things. So when we were building GrowRemote, I was able to build a website or build a website, or God, I saw somebody ask what the idea was, and it was so crap. I don't think I could pitch it again. But build a website or whatever it was, set up a MailChimp, or all of these kind of things that only come, I think, when you have experience in the tech space. And knowing a little bit about everything allowed me to build solutions. And whether you're in kind of our first company was conferencing software. This one is, remote working, or Deposify was the one in the middle, a deposit technology company. And no matter what you're in, if you have the skills to build, then you're able to solve for so many different problems. And no matter what you come up against, you're able to build and solve. And I think that's mostly why people get involved in the tech space. Also, that there are jobs in it, but you really don't know what the jobs of the future will be in the tech space. So I think being curious, combined with coming into this sector, leads to some really brilliant things. I probably didn't answer your question directly there. Largely, just follow your gut. That's what I did anyway. Like, maybe technology isn't for you. Maybe it is for you. I think a startup is a great place to get to grips with everything technology. Because when I went in, I was doing technical support, and I had to learn like SQL and things that I never knew a clue about. And 6 months later, I knew enough about them to have the basics in them, and that served me hugely well.
I think a good follow-on question for that is, how would you describe working in a startup against something like, a general corporation like BDO or BOI? It's great that you've got experience in both. How would you kind of contrast working in the startup versus big company?
Yeah, so like even technically Bank of Ireland would now be a technology company, right? So even if you're coming into banking, you're kind of coming into technology, really. I would say they're a polar opposite, right? So how you get things done is in a startup is you just cut through the crap and you just get stuff done. That's what you do, right? So if I want to do, and we're partner with Microsoft, and we're growing into the States. So we've got there's 40 grand if you want to set up a chapter in London or Illinois now at the moment. And we really want to drive that. So when I get off this call, I'm going to set up a landing page. I'm going to do up some Google ads. I'm going to push it out on social media. I'm going to do all those kind of things. And the job there is to get it done. In a large enterprise, it's more to do with stakeholder engagement. There's two things that I would think in a large enterprise that you need to know: how to do your job, which is one part, and then how the organization works. And you need to have both need to work together. So if you can do your job well, but you don't know how the organization works or the people that you need to know or who you need to be communicating with, then your job won't be too viable, in my opinion. Whereas if you want to get stuff done, you need to stakeholder engagement and knowing who is where and the logistics of the organization. And so it's completely, I think, different. But both skill sets are really, really useful. And I think experience in both a startup and a large enterprise are really useful, largely because I believe that fundamentally innovation happens at the intersection. So if you have experience in both, you're flying it.
Yeah, and then I think it's safe to say that if working in a startup versus a corporation is so different, then I think applying for them is different too. So do you have any words of advice for someone if they were to apply for a startup or apply for a corporation? Like, how would those interview processes or applications differ, do you think, in your mind?
I'm getting really dogged about this now, actually. But actually, if I was coming out of college, a startup is riskier, right? So when I was in my first startup, I didn't get paid for 3 months, which was grand because I was used to not having any money. And without that background, I wouldn't be able to know half of what I know now, really. So if I was coming out of college, it's really the only time where you can go to that riskier organization and take that leap. So I'd come out straight into a startup. And in a startup, it's more about your attitude and your approach to things. So one day you might be helping to pitch for $1 million in funding from a VC and create a pitch deck. And another day you might be running a hackathon or learning about debits and credits and setting up invoices. And you need to do a little bit of everything. So the only thing that will help you do all of that is a good can-do attitude. And then you'll figure it out. You definitely will. Whereas in an organization, you need to be prepared as well to climb a corporate ladder. Like it's a different approach. You'll you'll go level 1, level 2, level 3, and kind of towing the party line, I guess, a bit more than in a startup. So it's understanding the organization, I guess, and how they work. I think how I got into Bank of Ireland was probably through my network, which actually came through Startup Weekend Ireland, Startup in Dublin. That's how I got in. So again, I think getting involved in societies and reaching out to people, and startup weekends and any hackathons, all of that is really useful. I think your community is always useful.
Yeah, you touched on it there, but so StartLab was Bank of Ireland's first incubator, and we saw from your LinkedIn, you were the program manager of StartLab. Can you tell us kind of what that role entailed and what it's all about?
So it was really cool. So that was the bank was setting up their first technology incubator, and it was in Galway, and we took 6 startups through for a period of 6 months. So myself and Jean Murphy, I don't know if maybe you guys wouldn't know, rockstar in the startup world, but we ran that. So it was doing whatever we could to help those companies learn and grow. So we might bring in a speaker every week on product market fit, on sales, on raising finance, whatever it is. But largely what we really tried to do in that incubator was whatever, because companies are at different stages in at different points of their life. So whatever they were trying to do, if they were trying to open a door, we would try to make it at least open a jar for them so that it wasn't so hard to get through. So whatever the bank could do to make it easier for them to grow, we would try and do. So for instance, lots of startups would try to sell into large enterprises, and trying to do that is really difficult. So like a normal enterprise might go to a startup and say, give us your last 3 months, 3 years, accounts, audited accounts. And you're like, I've only been alive 3 months, I've no idea. We don't have those. So at least with these startups working with the bank, they will be able to, again, get exposure to a large enterprise and understand what the asks are, what they'll be looking for. And then it was easier for them to go and do it. So really it was helping them in the basics that they would need to grow a company, and then that bespoke stuff that really only Bank of Ireland could do to gain access to real proper growth, leveraging our connections and pieces like that.
Okay, cool. So then if we could just move on to, obviously you're very passionate about your role with GrowRemote, and smart remote working is obviously highly relevant in today's climate and everything going on. Can you kind of tell us about your role maybe in GrowRemote and the motivations behind the organization?
Yeah, so in GrowRemote, we were built a bit like the Mehel of old rural Ireland. So I don't know if you know the concept, but like if your crops were dying, you'd be like, you go down the pub, like, hey lads, will you come down to the farm on Saturday? We need to like fix it. Wasn't exactly how it happened, but anyways, everybody from the village would come down to the farm on Saturday, and they'd all get to work and they would solve whatever challenges that particular farmer had. And nobody said, Johnny, you come and you need to do that. And nobody said, what am I getting out of it? It was just a thing that they did because that's how the community operated. And that's very much how GrowRemote was built. So somebody built a jobs board just because they felt that we needed one. Somebody else built part of the website. Somebody else, when we had a conference, they drew up all these like really cool kind of synopsis summaries of the conversations that happened there. People just gave different things. And my role through GrowRemote was, I was just the longest in it, so I stuck with it. And I just did. So particularly in the remote working space in Ireland, there was a lot of, do you know what they should do? And someone should really do. And we just went, actually, we'll just do that. Instead of talking about what other people should do, we will just figure out a way to do it. And whatever it is, we'll learn it, even if we don't know. So my co-founder Rose has a term, which is over the line specialist, which is just getting stuff over the line. And I think that's what we did all the time. It doesn't matter what it was, training, working with companies, raising finance, just get it over the line and worry about it then. So if there was a doer job, that's what I would call my role there. And it evolved very naturally then, Molly. So we were a volunteer organization and we had to raise finance to be sustainable. And I was lucky that I'd already been a part of an organization that raised $1 million in VC funding. So it wasn't so alien to me. And then we had to hire in a team. So our team only started a month ago. So it's all still very new and very like moldable, and who knows where it's going.
So I have a question. Just this is more of a guess about the future rather than a question about yourself. But obviously, given the situation with COVID and remote working and how prevalent it is now, do you think that remote working is here to stay? Do you think that it'll be much more widely accepted now than it was before? How do you kind of envision remote working changing?
So I think if we look at what's happening in companies, it's a third. Given actually this is a Women in Tech Day, it's a Women in Tech session, we can see kind of a sea change in how things are happening, right? So there was an announcement, was it Indeed, I think, or Microsoft, sorry, announced that they were going remote, right? So what they meant by remote is what I would mean by remote, which is you have choice. So we use the term locationless employment. Locationless means it can be in the office in Dublin city centre, or it can be in Armore Island in your house. Like, we don't care, because your location is truly irrelevant. But a bit like, on International Women's Day, and some people say, what about the men? And you're like, no, we care about them too. It's just that this day we're just focusing on this one area because we believe it needs support. It's the same as that, but when people go remote, people are saying, what about I want to work in the office? I don't want to work from my box room. And you're saying, well, actually, we don't want to force you into your box room either. So the future is most likely a third fully in the office, a third between the office and home or hub, and a third fully remote. And so if we look at it that way, then we're looking at kind of remote first organizations, where no matter where you are, you must operate as though you're remote. Because if you are in the office, you're still remote from 2/3 of your organization who are halfway in, halfway out, and on an island. So no matter where you are, you're fully distributed. And so I'd say the future is probably hybrid. But for us, I was thinking about it today, we couldn't have asked for the change that has happened in terms of Web Summit are advertising jobs without a location now, as are many other companies that weren't doing it. Indeed, we're doing that. I think Glassdoor, PayPal advertised jobs without a location. 6 months ago, all their jobs were just in Dublin, and now they're at least within the island of Ireland. And other companies obviously will let you work anywhere across Europe, which is super for you coming out of college, whenever you're graduating, I don't know. But you can go and live in Dublin city centre, and then go and live in Lisbon, and then go home, and then do whatever you want. You'll be totally free. And that's probably the future, yeah.
This is just a question I came up with on the spot. I don't know if you've been able to answer it, but is there an issue with like tax around where you're employed when you're working remotely? Like if you were to move to another country or to work internationally?
I think one of the pushback was like Microsoft are going remote, but you're only allowed in Ireland. For lots of reasons, that would be the case. So say if you take, so from our perspective, because we're about economies and communities, we want as many jobs as we can ring fenced into Ireland, right? So when the IDA are attracting companies, for instance, they will get a grant aid if they are hiring within the island of Ireland, which means you can't be paying tax to the Lisbon government, Portuguese government, and you have to be paying it here, right? So any IDA companies will probably be just Ireland based. And lots of other companies will too, not just because of tax. So say in Ireland, I think it's 180 days that you can be outside of the country. Any longer than that, you have to pay tax. But it's not just tax, it's also employment regulations. So when we say remote work, that used to be consulting and freelancing, and now it is employment. So I can't remember which country it is. Is it Germany? If you want to fire somebody, you have to go to court and explain to a judge why you're firing them or something like that. Whereas obviously in Ireland, it's 3 warnings and you're let go. And sure, we have a Labour Relations Committee, but we're a little bit different. So there are all these employer regulations that are very different across even just Europe, that make it kind of complicated. And that's why there's companies like Deal, Remote.com, and an Irish company called Boundless. And Deal and Remote.com have raised millions in funding, DEEL, not DEAL, because this is such a huge growing area, and it's an area where people are going to run into problems and will want to solve for them too. GrowRemote would love, and we've already asked, if the European Union could get together and standardise at least employment practices, but like never going to happen. It's still ask, but it's never going to happen.
Yeah, it's a really complicated subject. I think a lot of my aunt is a HR. she's a recruiter in Verizon, and I know they have a lot of issues with recruiting people at the minute because they feel they're restricted just to recruiting people in Ireland, because if they recruit someone in the UK or in Germany or in France, and there's another lockdown and they can't come to Ireland, then there's a whole big issue there with employment law and tax and everything.
Yeah, but tell her that GrowRemote will help her hire anywhere she wants in Ireland.
Definitely. Okay, well, I have another question here, which is, obviously you've had a lot of experience, you've had a lot of jobs in different companies and everything. What would you say your highlights are? What would you, if you were able to pick one as your favorite job or something like that?
I wouldn't pick one as my favorite job. I would say the one thing that I am good at, that I know that I'm good at, is getting good people in a room and following good people. So I have always worked, not always worked, but in various jobs, when I've had the opportunity to decide where I'm going, worked for really good people. So being able to work for Jean Murphy taught me a huge amount. Being able to work for my first employer, Paul Cloran, taught me a huge amount. And people who believe in you as a person and who back you and who want to see you grow is the area where you'll get the most out of, no matter what you're doing. A bad manager can make your life absolutely hell, which is also the downside of going working for a big corporate, right? You could end up with, even if the company's really good, you don't know who you'll be working with for years of your life. Not that I'm putting down corporates at all, but largely, if you can find good people and work with them, really smart, curious, kind people, then you're flying it. And you will get that through events like this or hackathons, and getting to know people a little bit before you're looking for a job.
So I just have a question here from earlier from Emma. She was asking what your idea was that you won the hackathon with. I think it's the hardware hackathon. That's what you called it, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I fully remember now? Oh yeah, okay. I think so. Okay. I know. I don't fully remember. But something about, I can't believe I don't remember this. So it was basically in pharmacies, there's a fridge, and pharmacists have to take the temperature of the fridge for medicines 3 times a day, and write it down in a little book. So it's really manual. You keep on forgetting. If you don't write it down, you get a black mark against your company. But also something used to happen where the fridges would go out. So if your electricity went out overnight or whatever, all of the medicine in the fridges in the pharmacies would go stale, and it would cost you a fortune. So you might lose like 2 million worth of product overnight. So we had just a smart shelf, and we would test the temperature of it, right? So it would automatically update the temperature of the fridge 3 times a day into a book. And it also made sure, again, for like the people who were checking the temperatures, that people weren't just making it up and writing it in a book, because this was an automatic temperature checker. And then we went into some other stuff like weight. So we would also check the weight of the shelf, and we would be able to see which products needed to be put to the front because of dates or whatever. Anyways, the idea was okay, but one of the reasons that we won is that we found, it was on obviously over a weekend, and we found the mobile number for the MD of Boots. And we called him up, and still connected to him on LinkedIn. And we called him up because his wife owned a florist, and he was like a business partner with her or whatever. And his mobile number was there. So if you Google the name of somebody and then 086, you'll probably find their mobile. Maybe this is how startups work then anyway. So we called him up over the weekend, and we're like, hey, listen, we're at this hackathon with like PCH and I can't remember, there was some other big company. We can't explain it, but listen, would you buy this fridge? And he was like, absolutely. And he sent us an email saying, because he didn't really understand what a hackathon was, because they were quite new then. And he was like, absolutely, yeah. And then we had our first customer, and then the lads, Liam Casey was there, and he was judging, and they loved it. And they actually loved it so much afterwards, they wanted us to continue on with it for fishing trawlers, because apparently when you're fishing, you don't know how much you're going to make for the fish until you get in and you're able to weigh them. But if we were able to weigh the fish while they were still out in the trawlers, the fishermen would know whether they could come in or out and be able to sell it at auction before they even got out at sea. Anyway, that was it. Maybe you just had to be there, right? Kind of sounds shit now, but it was good then. Like 5 years ago too. 6 maybe.
I really like how proactive you were, just getting the numbers straight away. I think that's a good tip for anyone who's doing our weekend soon. But yeah. So as this is the Women in Tech, obviously, series, one question we kind of like to ask at the end of all of our interviews is if you would have any, it might be a bit of a tricky question, any advice that's specific to a female who's hoping to break into the world of tech, or even like anything you can reflect on from your career when you felt, that your gender was taken into account, or something you've learned from that?
Of course it was, right? So absolutely it was. And there's really subtle things that happen that you won't even be able to explain, right? So I think it's definitely taken into account, right? But you can't necessarily let it get to you. So one thing that I did is I mentioned Andrea Wade, Christina Lumine was another person. They mentored me from when I was 23, maybe, all the way up. And no matter what I was doing, they were there. That was really important. They help you with everything, right? So I would find somebody who's a little bit ahead of you and get their support. There was something else that I thought of when you mentioned that I can't think of now. Oh yes, when people talk about women sometimes, they talk about how we need help with confidence and we need help with whatever. And then you can go to sessions where, and this is maybe controversial of an opinion, but whatever. You can go to sessions where you're spending hours of your time talking about how you need confidence or whatever. Actually, maybe you need hours of your time talking about a balance sheet and a profit and loss sheet and how you make sales. And instead of focusing on all the areas where you mightn't even, like, if you just I don't know, just got into what you will actually be doing, it could be a little bit more helpful. So, that's, I don't know, find people who are already doing what you want to do, women. And I think most women want to help other women. It's definitely something that I found. I have always found women always wanting to help me. And I think that, to finish it off, I've been backed by lots of people, right? So particularly bosses and male bosses have like backed me and said like, oh, Tracy, you can do whatever. But it's often been women who have given me seats on boards, who have given me money, who have given me jobs. It's often been women who've actually like handed me, thought that I could do stuff and given me opportunities.
Yeah, I have to agree with what you said, that they do seem to be very willing. And I mean, that goes for both men and women, of course. But even just over the past few weeks and months, reaching out to people, it's amazing how kind of willing people are to help and encouraging to even university students to get on board with it. So yeah, thank you so much for those kind of honest words. Some great advice, and it was really interesting hearing about your journey with GrowRemote and your various many roles that you had. I think we'll finish it up there, but thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and coming on, and very insightful.
No problem at all.
Thanks a lot, Tracy. Really appreciate it coming on. And I'll just say before we wrap up, guys, if you're watching, we have an event on Thursday with a guy called Shane Hamilton. Shane founded a company called BeatSpeak AI, and it sounds really, really cool. It's basically he trained an algorithm to calculate someone's heartbeat from just a video. So and with that, they can actually predict if someone has an illness like COVID or something. So they reckon they might be able to use it like they use those temperature checkers when you're going into the gym and stuff. So sounds like it'll be a really cool one to attend if you're free on Thursday afternoon. And we actually have one more question from Oisin just before we wrap up, a last second question. I'll throw this up and then we'll let you go.
Yeah. So I saw that, right? It used to be easier, because I'll tell you, like there's kids, they're not kids, but like Sinead O'Keefe, for instance, right? Or Daniel Kine, or there's loads of students that I would have met when they were younger, who I just bumped into at Startup Weekend, and who I do anything for it, right? So I just think they're deadly. But I just happened to meet them, and then you kind of just, for me anyway, with mentors, you kind of just click with them. It's not as if it's a formal thing. It just happens to be that you click. So it's a little bit harder when you're not just bumping into people like that. But the minimum that you can do is just send somebody I'm just conscious that I don't reply to lots of stuff, so I'm conscious of saying this, but that you send somebody a note and say, hey, any chance you give me like 10 minutes of a quick phone call whenever. And that's the best you can do for now. I know the TCD, just by the way, if you want another job, Molly and Sam, or some other, they're doing like a mentorship program, and they sent me like a document of what would be expected of me in an hour every month or something, with the founder in Trinity, and it was really clear. And then they basically, we come onto a session like this, some mentors give their pitch for 5 minutes, and then the mentees choose who they want to pick out of the mentors, and that happens. So it's kind of like a mentor matchmaking session or whatever. So yeah, if you want a job, that's it. But in lieu of in-person events where those kind of synergies and natural things happen, just sure, reach out on LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever.
Brilliant. I think we might wrap it up there again. So just thanks a million, Tracy. Really, really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you
so much.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you later.
Thanks so much.
Bye.